Hi, I'm Verónica Moreno. I'm here with Ashley Koff today. She's a registered dietitian that has made nutrition possible. She's released two books, her latest one being Your Best Shot. So please, thank you so much for being here and welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
In your latest book, you actually talk about how our body reacts to hormones, different signals. But today I wanted to actually focus on inflammation.
Yeah.
It's something people don't know much about. And to start with, I wanted to know how you would describe inflammation. So is it good? Is it bad?
Yeah, thank you. So I've actually been a practitioner for 25 years, and inflammation didn't really make it onto the scene as part of the conversation until maybe about the last 10. And it was really about this idea of being anti-inflammation, about how do we turn off inflammation. And we'll talk about the difference between anti-inflammation and truly resolving inflammation. So I think what ended up happening was we realized that the body it's not if we just eat food, and even if it's healthy food for us, or if we exercise, we realize the body is more complicated than that. And it has all of these different responses, stress as a response, inflammation as a response. It has this whole list of things to do. And what ended up happening was what we realized was when the faucet was on, when inflammation kept going, not that it was a problem, but when it kept going, these other things didn't happen the way that they were supposed to happen. And so over time, we started to say, well, inflammation is what we call the root cause or the base problem of all of these diseases. But we didn't get to the place of it's actually that we're not turning off inflammation. And so we'll get there in a moment.
Exactly. That's something that I wanted to discuss with you, because how would you describe anti-inflammation compared to resolution?
Yeah, it's interesting. And too, when whether English is your first language or not, I think we can get very caught up in the different words, right? And so what I like to help people understand is that the body has an inflammatory response, and inflammation is very important. And inflammation is really smart. It basically is a signal that says something is going on in the body, and the body has to wage war. It is like, we need the army, call them in, we've got to attack this. So there is an active phase to inflammation. And the idea of being anti-inflammatory is saying, well, we want to make sure that we don't turn on inflammation, right? That's actually not the truth. We want to turn on inflammation only when it's needed. But more importantly is this second phase. Once the inflammation has done the job, once the alert signal has gone off, we've gone to war, and it's no longer needed, we have to make sure that the next group comes in, and that's the group that says, we're here to clean up. We're here to restore peace. We're here to allow the body to rebuild. And it's in that phase, when inflammation is resolved, when inflammation is turned off, that the body can act the way the body is supposed to act. Because when the body is fighting, when it's in the active phase of inflammation, it's not going to prioritize or do the other things. So I think the important piece of resolution is understanding that, and I think this was a Charles Sirhan who said it in the interview, but I remember somebody saying that we used to think of inflammation going off as a passive thing, that that activity just sort of stopped, at its own pacing. And when we learned that it actually is a stage, a phase, now we know that we have to make sure that the body has what it needs to enact that phase.
Yeah, it's true that instead of a passive, it's an active biological process.
Right. Yeah.
So for that to happen, to resolve inflammation, our body needs specialized pro-resolving mediators.
Right.
Our body most of the time is not able to produce enough specialized pro-resolving mediators. So I saw that you recommend in your clinic for your patients, and that you do a really detailed study on each of your patients, their body, their lifestyle. And then I saw that you do recommend SPM enriched supplementation. And I wanted to understand a little bit about that, what markers you look at, and what's the framework that you analyze when actually prescribing that to your patients.
Sure. So when I learned that omega-3s and omega-6s, so essential fatty acids, they need to be acted on by enzymes, and they become these resolvins, right? Like aspirin is a resolvin. They become a resolvin, and the resolvins are what we call specialized pro-resolving mediators. And we're talking about lipids here, so we're talking in the fat form. Okay. So that actually explains something super, super important to me, because there was a time period when fish oil became really popular, but fish oil wasn't really fish oil. It was just isolated EPA and DHA. And we would see research where the EPA and the DHA in some people would do very well and it would really help them. And in other people, it wasn't helping them. But you know what was always helping people was when they ate good quality fish, right? So the fish always, it was like, yes, eat the fish, but it was debatable, with the fish oil. So that led me at the time to say, the fish oil that we're consuming is actually, it must be removing something that's important. And what I learned at that point is, number one, there are other omegas, so we might want to look at that. But also that in fish, we can actually find a small amount of pro-resolving mediators. And this is, kind of, my version of what happened for Dr. Charles Sirhan. So that helped me understand how, from a body standpoint, there might be something else, what I'll call essential, that we really need, that we may need to get from food or from supplements. And here's, I think, where the rubber meets the road. When we consume essential fatty acids, when we get in the building blocks, the omega-3s, the omega-6s, they still have to go through an enzyme reaction. Mm-hmm. And it occurred to me that depending on age, stress, digestive function, genetics, and other factors, the body may not be able to convert and make as much of these pro-resolving mediators. So it could be in some people that they're not getting it enough from food. It could be in other people that their body has the building blocks, but their body's not efficient enough in making the resolvents. The third place is it could also be that the circumstances for that person from a health issue, an autoimmune disease, a inflammation that is turned on, maybe it's a hip pain, maybe it's headaches, maybe it's related to perimenopause or to low testosterone, different things. In that time period, the body actually has an increased need on that part, right? So all of this, when I learned about pro-resolving mediators in a supplement form, I was like, okay, now I understand. So there are some companies that take what's in fish and they maintain the pro-resolving mediators. I love that. There are other companies like Lipinova, and when I found this out, I was like, okay, you can take me through the process of how you're actually extracting and creating as much of the SPMs as you can get in there in an effective way. And I was like, this is brilliant. And so somebody gets in some of the building blocks, some of the EPA and the DHA, and then they get in the pro-resolving mediators. So in my practice, I've been using it to help people get off of other pain medications that are maybe also actually worsening inflammation, right? I think that's such a big one where, hey, if I'm taking a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory, or I'm taking a pain medication, I've been able to use it for people who are experiencing really difficult arthritis or rosacea or, skin flare-ups or plaque, and, from an autoimmune standpoint, and say, let's come in here to resolve inflammation. So it's really dependent a little bit on what's going on in someone's diet, but also what's going on in their digestion. And more often than not, I find that when somebody is actually in a phase where inflammation is higher, I might see that in ferritin, I might see that in HSCRP. I might also see it in an inability for us to optimize things like blood sugar, or even weight on that part, and really looking at fat mass and muscle mass and weight composition. Then I can come in and say, hey, this would be a beneficial supplement. So long answer to a specific question.
No, but that was great, because I feel like the general public still does not understand why inflammation is good and why we need to resolve inflammation. They only focus on the negative side. Right. And it is true that people try to maintain a good lifestyle based on sleeping well, eating well, and creating good habits, but still they don't understand that inflammation, it can be either low-grade inflammation or chronic inflammation that develops throughout time, which we don't notice. Right. And that's why I believe that we need dietitians, nutritionists to actually guide us and let us know and explain to us what is wrong. Because we can be eating well, we can follow everything, we can be eating quality fish, but it's still not enough. Right. Same as before, we would actually eat omega-3, thinking that it would actually help us with inflammation before for pathologies like arthritis or what you were just saying. It is true that we would get prescribed omega-3. Yeah. But what Lipinova has is we directly extract from the EPA and DHA the SPMs.
I'm going to share a story of a patient. I think that would be helpful. So one of my patients, first, one of my first awakenings with, if you'll call it, with pro-resolving mediators was I had a patient who was on 5 grams a day of EPA and DHA, came to me, who was still taking, and I can't remember if it was Advil or Tylenol, but was still taking something and was just like, I just can't get this pain to come down, right? And I was like, I've heard of this thing. I've tried it myself, and it makes a lot of sense. And I also can't tell you to eat more fish. Part of the problem with fish today is a lot of the fish still, it has microplastics, or it has toxins, or it has, and also this was somebody who was already eating some fish, and there just wasn't more opportunity. So I'm like, I don't have an option to help. So I thought that I was going to use the pro-resolving mediators to keep him at 5 grams of the omega-3s and just get him off of the Tylenol and Advil. I got him down to 1 gram additional of the omega-3s and the Lipinova product in terms of being able to get inflammation to be fully resolved on that part. And we actually were able to start to see gut repair work, right? I had another woman who came to me for her weight health. Like it's a, big focus, perimenopausal. She did not want to go on a GLP-1 agonist. But one of the things she said to me was, the only reason I would go on a GLP-1 agonist, and tell me if I have to do this, is I really think that I have this inflammation problem going on. I said, I wholeheartedly know you do. So you're on medications for acne, and you have acne on that part. You are on painkillers because you have a back issue, and this back issue had been going on for years now. And you've been taking almost regularly between that and cramps, you've been taking regular non-steroidal anti-inflammatory. So she wasn't taking aspirin. She was likewise taking a Tylenol or an Advil, et cetera. And then we went on a couple other things, and she's like, but my diet, like I have hemp seeds, I have this. I was like, your diet is great. Like actually your diet is great on that part. But the medications, I think we can resolve inflammation and actually get you off of your medications. And that's what we were able to do. And so I think in that way, we have more tools in the toolkit than we've had before. But I also want to say buyer beware, because one of the things that I am seeing, and this is why I came to you all and was like, I was writing my book and I'm like, I need to know about Lipinova and how you guys are doing this, because I wanted to make sure that as I'm seeing the word resolvins or pro-resolving mediators pop up in all of these places from these different sources, I wanted to know, what was enough? Like what's the amount? What's the dosage? And then how do I know that that it's truly going to be that resolvin, that it's going to, and you showed me what that looks like.
Yeah. That's really good. To be honest, we do have a focus where we do clinically test. Yeah. And we did clinically test Lipinova. We do have several studies up to now. We have 7 clinical studies. Yeah. And that helps us understand that this ratio of SPMs does work and will show results on our patients, resolving inflammation. Mm-hmm. What you were saying before about pain, we do actually have a clinically study where we actually proved that there was a reduction of up to 45% in pain reduction. Yeah. And we actually had our patients stop consuming NSAIDs to see if actually Lipinova would help them reduce that inflammation and reduce that pain. Right. And amazingly, throughout the study, we did not have a single patient drop out from the study. And we did see that there would be a chance that this could be the future as well. Let's focus on resolving the inflammation, because then other factors will actually get fixed.
Yes. And we see this in medicine in a lot of places. My brother does research at Yale on macrophages, and that's pond scum. And so in the US, we talk about those dirty ponds, but actually the stuff that's in there, when we look at that versus say an antibiotic, the ability to actually go in and to surround and prevent the disease. And so, we see this in other places. And I think the clinical research is so important. And also at the start of something like this, having an ingredient that someone can trust, so I love that you're doing the clinicals. I personally, I love looking at clinicals, but then I also want to test it. Now, I don't test everything myself. I'll say to a patient, hey, do you want to try this? And usually at that point, they're like, I'll try anything. But I happen to have been training for a pretty significant endurance event, and I had run the equivalent of a marathon, so around 26 miles, and then got in my car and drove for 9 hours. And I got out of my car with such bad hip pain. And then I was 3 days away from my big mountain climb. And everyone that I talked to, because I called people, I'm like, what do I do? Do I get a massage? Do I foam roll? Everyone's like, just start taking Tylenol, just hit it hard, take aspirin. And I actually would have said yes, but I was so worried about my digestion on that part. And I remembered, and I was like, wait, I use, and so I was like, okay, let me get the product. And so I used the Lipinova and I took it every 2 hours. And within the first day, the pain was gone. Now I still had to rehab my hip. It wasn't like I could, just go out and go running, but I was able to have those other things, but I didn't have the acute pain. And so what my body was trying to signal to me in that moment was, I made sure you knew that you should not go climbing and go do your other stuff. You need 2 days where you are not doing anything. And that pain side of things, and as the inflammation went down, I was able to get back to it and be successful. So I think it's so important for us to do clinical research. And then as a practitioner to also come in and say, so if it's apples and oranges, if I have, an NSAID, which we call non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, if I have Tylenol or Advil, et cetera, here, and then I have Lipinova's SPMs here, then what I know is they are going to resolve inflammation. They are not going to damage my gut. So I know over here, they're going to turn off inflammation, but they are going to damage my gut. Over here, I'm triggering repair work to also happen. And over here, when I create more challenge to my gut, I'm actually limiting the ability for repair work to work. So I think that as practitioners, to your point, whether it's clinician, whether it's a dietitian, I think like all orthopedic surgeons, I think, my physical therapist, I think my trainer. So I think everybody needs to know about this, but also to know that it's not a question of just eating more fish or, like in that regard too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very important because it is true that Lipinova can also help you get better, like for you when it happened with your hip, but it can actually also help you prevent.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's very important to as well focus on that because I feel like we are actually shifting. And instead of focusing that much on fixing, we should actually as well focus on preventing that anything bad will happen.
Right. Yeah. So. I mean, it is one of, I think it's funny because I did this podcast a while back. It's a great, I love Kara Fitzgerald's podcast, but we were chatting and, you've got a doctor and you've got what I'm called a backwards doctor because in the States, DR, I'm an RD. Right? On that part. Yeah. So in that regard, the doctor and the backwards doctor, and she's saying well, I would put everyone on an omega-3 and then some people on the SPM. I said, oh, well, I put everyone on the SPM and some people on the omega-3, noting that we've got, some of that in there. But it's because I look at, I can help people get omega-3s in the diet, and I love doing that. But to make sure that you're getting the finished product, the SPM, that's harder, on that part.
Yeah, if you're specifically targeting inflammation and you need that to be resolved, it is true that
or to prevent it, to prevent it. Yeah,
it is true that Lipinova will help you, and for that reason specifically. Although omega-3 can obviously be really helpful for other things.
Of course.
It is true that if we're honestly truly targeting inflammation, Lipinova will
resolution, right? Inflammation resolution. Yeah.
So I as well wanted to know, so as you were writing your book, obviously you came across Lipinova and everything, but I wanted to know how did you start trusting Lipinova? How did you actually decide to tell your patients to try it?
Yeah, thank you. So first of all, and it was even before I was writing the book, I was working on case studies with patients. And I was like, all right, I've got and I years ago knew that I was not going to just give people EPA and DHA. So I was really looking for true whole fish oils, right? And that led me to a couple of different companies that I really trust and I knew the ingredients. And I also looked at trusted fish, where it had been, was able to see that it was clear of microplastics and it's, trying to have no detectable or very low detectable of any toxins. And so I'm like, all right. So as I put all of that together, then I had learned about SPM. So I first learned hearing Charles Sirhan, and then I dove deep into his work because I was also really interested in cancer and an autoimmune disease. I think that understanding how we can prevent inflammation from staying on. So that's what I would say resolution is, right? Is just so key on that part. And then I also work with a lot of athletes, and I'm like a I'm this endurance athlete in the making. So I think all of those things to me said, I really think that this makes a difference. And I started asking questions. So after I met Sirhan, and I listened to his podcast with Kara, and then had a couple of conversations with her. I then talked to somebody and they actually told me they sourced their ingredient from you. And then we all are at this conference and I literally was like, I went up to a friend, I was like, I have to meet them. I was like, I'm so excited. And I think everybody was like, I came in pretty hot. I was like, I am so excited about this, and And then I asked to see your research. And then I also asked to have conversations because I was really confused about, do we want higher quantities of SPMs? And that's what I think is also really interesting. We are not talking about a lot. When we look at 500 milligrams and we see in there about 170 milligrams, like this doesn't, like a little bit of this really works very well. Financially, that's a nice win too, because the ingredient can be expensive. But when we look at the true cost of unresolved inflammation, this is a big win on that.
Exactly.
Part. Yeah.
It is true that we did want to analyze when creating this product.
Yeah.
Which dosage was the perfect dosage for patients.
Yes.
It is true that people tend to think, like, for example, for omega-3, yes, they were aiming for like 5 grams, 6 grams to get better. But with this case, with SPMs, you don't need a high dosage. And the ratio that we actually have is the one that has been proven to give results to the patients.
Right.
It is true that the dosage can depend in case you're a healthy patient or an unhealthier patient. You can actually diagnose them and give them a bit more of SPMs, a little bit less. But the ratio in Lipinova specifically is the one that is proven that it's the perfect one for your body to then produce automatically the SPMs naturally. So consuming Lipinova, it's not only about just consuming the pill. It's about the effect it's going to have on your body afterwards and the organic production that it will have in your body. So I feel like that's also the important part for people to understand. It's not just about what you're consuming. It's about how your body is taking in the product.
And we have a variety. I mean, I never use the word perfect. So I will say better, but not perfect. Some of my patients need more. And some people, and I think we're learning more about the genetics. I've looked at the genetics and I see where some people have variations in their genes that make them less efficient at utilizing certain fats. And in that space, that is going to be a person where I'm probably going to lean into even a little bit more of this, or I'm going to lean into dietary sources and also supplemental sources, and those kinds of things. But there's also the person who maybe doesn't have those gene inefficiencies, but their digestion is very poor. So in the beginning, I might need them to be on something more, and then I optimize their digestion to make sure that they can utilize. So, I think it's a really good point to be thinking about how do we personalize this for everyone.
I feel like that's one of the great things that you do and that you explain in the introduction of your book, how you actually personalize this for your clients. You look at everything, you look at the whole picture, and then you ensure that the whole supplementation that you're giving them, it's actually going to work and it's going to help them in the long run.
Well, I'm going to hope that it's going to work. What we do, and that would be the goal. And I use whatever I have. I don't necessarily always have all the data or, but we can find out a lot by talking, too, and like having a conversation. So that's the luxury. It's why I became a dietitian and not a doctor. I want to be able to ask all those questions. I want to ask about somebody's poop, somebody's sleep. I want to ask about their family, kind of get in deep. But the other piece is when I create recommendations, I've been doing this 25 years. I have a pretty good chance, sense of that something is going to be effective. I don't know it's going to be effective, though, until you come back to me and we look at things again, right? Or until you share with me, hey, I lost 5 pounds, but I look like I lost 15, like that kind of thing, right? And so in that conversation, I think it's really important for us to, understand, and kind of look at that. Now, there's another piece to that, which is we've added now GLP-1 agonists, the medications. So they're known as semaglutide, tirzepatide, et cetera. And they're getting touted, rightfully so, for being part of helping the system not activate inflammation or even helping us see numbers of inflammation come down. They're not, they're not replacing your SPM. So I want to be clear about that. So we still need to resolve inflammation, even if somebody is using this medication, and especially if they're going to come off of this medication. Because if you use the medication and it improves your inflammation response, and you decide to go a longer period of time without having the medication, we then need to make sure that the body has what it needs to do on its own. So I think it's going to be real important for us to get that right as we go forward.
And as well, the importance of following up, making sure that the patient keeps going back and making sure that...
See what's working.
Exactly. And that you don't stop out of nowhere and that you make sure that inflammation, importantly, it's still being resolved.
Right. Yes.
Perfect.
I'm such a big fan. I'm so grateful to you all. And one of my favorite things about the collaboration that we've set up here is that you guys are continuing. You're so research based. And so I keep having these questions, so I've been like, well, what about this fish? And what about algae? And what about, so I love that you guys are continuing to move that research forward to see how we can understand this in the plant kingdom. And also how we can understand it, kind of how it impacts other fish as well.
Yeah. To us, our goal is to make sure that all our technological processes are the most advanced in the market to ensure that our fish is the cleanest as it can be, that our final product that we sell can be as safe, like the safest in the market, hopefully.
Right.
And yeah, honestly, we're really happy that we got to meet you, reading your book and seeing how you're spreading the science, which is actually our slogan, is we want to spread the science.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's hard for consumers to actually want to learn a bit more like the scientific part of things.
Yeah.
So we love this collaboration with you because you explained it in such an easy and understandable way in your book that we were really excited to meet you, because we just wanted to sit together and be able to talk about it and to spread the science to everyone and make sure that if people have questions, well, we're here to help them. We're here to guide them throughout their journey. And I love the fact that you do personalize everything with your patients. You analyze their lifestyle, what they eat, how they are. And I believe that that's the best way to actually help them.
Thank you so much.
So thank you so much for being here with us today. And well, I hope that your tour in the US goes well.
Thank you.
And
we'll bring it to Spain.
Yes, you have to bring it to Spain, definitely.
I'm in. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.